Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we're going to talk about real estate assessments. And while that might not seem like the most exciting topic, it is for most of us. Our home is our biggest investment. And here to give us the pulse of the market here in Hampton is our assessor, Brian Gordineer. Welcome, Brian.
Morning, Robin.
You guys, your office does this Herculean task of looking at different levels of detail at all the properties in the city, like 50,000 properties
Over
every year.
50,000.
That's a big job. And you can't, it's not, people don't always understand the difference between an assessment and an appraisal. Appraisal is where someone would come in and look at my house and I would let them inside.
Right.
And you would get a whole lot more specific information.
Much
Yours
more
is a little
detail.
broader brush. So let's start with how your folks do that.
How we do that every year, we do have over 50,000 parcels in the city that we are responsible for looking at on an annual basis. So in general, we look at about 10% of those every year in detail. And we
exterior details still.
Exterior and using aerial photography. So if we can't get into a backyard because it's fenced, we have extremely detailed aerial photography that we can measure down to 6 inches. So it is to a great level of detail from the exterior.
So if someone's made changes, they haven't gone through the permit process or done exactly legally, you can still catch some of that.
That's correct. That's correct. And we do this, that level of detail on the 10% every year. So over a 5-year period, we have looked at all of the buildings in the city at a good level of detail. And then we're looking at statistical reports because the basis of whether we change a value in a property or in a neighborhood is based on something called an assessment sales ratio. And we have the current assessment, and then we track the sales. And that assessment divided by the sale price gives us a ratio, and ideally we should be at 1 or 100%. And then if we're not at that 1, it means that we either need to look at that property and neighborhood for either a possible increase or a possible decrease. So if we're at less than the 1 or 100%, if we're say at 90 or 85%, that would be a neighborhood or a property we'd want to target to consider for an increase. And then of course if we're, as we had experienced in the last several years, if we were over 100%, maybe at 105% or 110%, we would be wanting to look at that to lower the assessment closer to where the sale price had been.
And this is all tricky because you fix your value at January 1st of each year. And so, of course, anything that sells after that, some of it could be maybe the assessment wasn't dead on. Some of it could be maybe things have changed since January 1. I mean,
That's right.
You're measuring a moving target.
Over the past several years when we did have a declining market, of course, we would set the assessments on January 1, and then those sales that were coming in after January 1 were showing that we were above. So in that situation, we had ratios of 103, then 105, and would get progressively higher and would mean that we would need to readjust that neighborhood or house.
Okay, so where are we now in terms of residential properties compared to last year?
Residential properties, overall, we saw a 1% decline. And to some degree, that's a little bit misleading because the residential market has been rather sluggish in the last 5 years. And whereas 6 or 7 years ago, we had 2,500 sales to base our assessment on, with the lack of activity as well as the number of foreclosures and what we call non-market transactions.
Parent to child or whatever, right.
We have only about 500 sales to base the reassessment on.
Wow, that is a slow market.
Much more of a challenge to understand those 500 sales and make sure that they are representative of of the neighborhoods throughout the city.
So you could go a whole year or even 2 years without enough sales in a neighborhood to really give you data on the market valuation.
That's correct. And we do look at comparable neighborhoods, but we're often very reluctant to make a change, either an adjustment down in this type of market that we were experiencing, or when we had a good market and we were making increases, the same thing. We just don't want to make a change unless we have convincing data and evidence to do that. So
you're saying some of the homes that will show declines this year, that valuation could have been changing over time, but the data caught up to it.
Right, we finally have the evidence to make the change.
And so for the most part, those aren't going to be homes that have declined in the past couple of years. There may be some, but by and large, these people are seeing the effects that some of us saw a few years back.
That's right. We might not have made a change in some of these neighborhoods in 3 years, but finally the evidence is there to make that adjustment.
So overall, if you're talking to homeowners out there today, most of the homes stayed the same in value.
That's correct.
It's 60%-ish? I can't remember your numbers now.
52% of the land book value is the residential market, and actually that's 90% of the parcels in the city are the residential market.
And of the residential market, how many of them stayed the same? It's really a lot.
It is. Well, citywide, we had 10%. 10% of the properties receive increases, and about 15 to 20% decreases.
Okay.
So, and the rest remained unchanged.
Now, if people at home are sitting there thinking, I didn't get a postcard this year, maybe they forgot me, we didn't forget you.
We didn't forget. We only send the notices to properties that change. They're change of assessment notices.
But because there's been so many changes over the past few years, people are probably used to seeing that postcard.
That's right. We have been sending a good number.
More.
Right. And this year, is remarkably different because this year we are sending out increases, which we had not done. We had, isolated increases in the past couple years, but this year, 10% of the city properties experienced an increase.
That is really big. Most of the increases, have been in very, very small pockets and really more in the commercial than in the residential before. So people get this increase and they have mixed feelings about it because it means, yes, my investment is growing, which is huge, or rebounding because most of us have been down over a little period of time. But it also could mean we're going to pay a little bit more in taxes. So I think we all react with this mixed bag.
It is, but ultimately it's a sign of a healthy real estate market to have that appreciation.
Well, and I know this isn't your favorite thing to be a real estate analyst, and it's not your job, but you are seeing overall signs of that trend going up. I know we're down a little bit this year, but you saw real positive signs, especially in the latter half of the year, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And the single family market in particular, overall the residential was a 1% decline this year in that snapshot. That residential market actually is composed of segments. The single family market performed best. It decreased by less than 1%, about 0.6 something percent. And then we saw the townhouses perform not quite as well. They decreased by about 1.2%. And then the condos did the worst, unfortunately, which is not atypical. Condominiums are much more susceptible to fluctuations in the market, so they're still experiencing a decline.
Well, it's also a smaller number, so any change is going to look a little bit magnified, I think.
So they decreased by 12%.
Okay.
So single family, which does constitute the largest portion of the residential market in Hampton, did relatively well.
And I always look for trends. You guys do a map every year, if we can put that up on the screen, that shows where there's increases and decreases and where things stayed the same. Sure. And I'm going to direct people to the green parts of that map because those are neighborhoods that saw increases. Maybe not the whole neighborhood, but within those green areas, there were some increases.
That's right.
And there's not a lot of pattern there. It is really spread throughout the city. Sometimes it's waterfront and big expensive expensive houses and sometimes it's not. I saw some increases in width, maybe not as much around the waterfront, but in some of the interior areas. I looked at Buckrow. It looks like there's some increases in Buckrow, and again, not just the waterfront, but back in there, the northwestern quadrant of the city. I mean, it's an encouraging map.
It is. It's very positive. Even when we were looking at the city with the declines in the past years, the good thing is that the declines, as well as now the increases, are throughout the city. It's not that we have certain areas of the city that are not performing very well from a real estate aspect.
And that's, the next point. So now that we've all talked about our own neighborhoods and our own houses and our own investment, what this means for the city, it is a sign of a healthy city overall when you've got growth spread out. It is a sign of a healthy city when the commercial properties did increase in value. And it is the first year since at least I've been here where the city isn't facing a huge revenue decline due to that valuation dropping. So it's still not keeping up with the pace of inflation. There's still going to be struggles putting together a budget when costs are increasing more than incomes and revenues. But it's a much better sign than we've seen in a while.
That's right. The taxable value, less our exemptions and credits, increased 0.07%. And while that is a very small amount, it's a positive trend that we've established. And actually, over the last 3 years, each of the last 3 years, this being the fourth year, we will have seen an increase in the situation of the land book.
And what's also exciting, which I didn't realize until you mentioned it yesterday at City Council, is that this is the preliminary figure, and these are the notices going out now, but between now and when tax bills go out, there will be new homes built. There will be new businesses online. The FedEx property, there's been all these things that are just beginning now will hit. So when you get to the formal, actual land book, the numbers could be better.
That's right.
Or will be better. We just don't know how much.
Over the last 5 years, the 6-month period from the time that we release the preliminary land book figures to the time that the actual land book gets created on July 1, we have increased the land book value by 0.34 to 1%. So there's that additional amount that's going to be on the land book. And right now we have a number of projects that are going to contribute to that. We have the Buckrow Bayfront, the homes being constructed now.
Yeah, that's exciting. They're really starting to go up.
A lot of activity there. We have the apartment senior restricted housing in Phoebus, a large complex. And then the Rite Aid at Willow Oak. So there are a number of these projects that are
commercial, residential, and multifamily.
That's right. Very exciting.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for the work that you do. Now, if someone has a question about how things are done or wants to look at an appeal or wants more information, Brian, how should they find you? Well,
they can give 311 a call and try to speak with us directly. They can go online. Our website, hampton.gov/assessor, is a great entrance to a lot of information. It will tell you about the assessment process as well as the appeal process. It also gives you access to the property information website of the city. So
and you can look up your own information.
That's right.
You can look up your assessment. I think it goes back about 5 years.
That's right.
Usually what's on there. And you can get the link to that map that we showed if you want to look in more detail about what your area of the city looks like, or somebody else's area, depending on where your interest lies. So there's a lot more there. And as you said, you can call 311. If you don't have a computer, they'll look it up for you.
We also have our annual report that's on the website as well. That gives a lot of background information about the real estate market and the land book that we talk about. So.
Well, thank you for coming by, Brian. I appreciate it. And I know you're just the messenger, but you've brought some of us bad news for like 3 or 4 years in a row now.
Now it's positive.
We're very glad to hear it and glad for all the work you and your staff do.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. I hope you understand a little bit about the assessment process and have heard some good news about home values. And if it didn't hit you this year, things are looking up and you might pick up that trend next year. Thanks for watching.